My parents left me behind when they moved abroad because I was too much of a burden. 10 years later, they came back broke, and I was the one who owned the house they used to live in. I used to think love meant sacrifice. My parents always said they did everything for the family, even when it hurt. But as I got older, I started realizing that the family never really included me. I'm Sophie, or, as my mother used to call me, the difficult one. Growing up, I wasn't the golden child. That was my younger brother, Ethan. He was their pride and joy, straight-A student, charming smile, athletic, everything I supposedly wasn't. Whenever relatives came over, my parents would brag about Ethan's grades, his awards, his dreams. And then, if someone asked about me, my mom would laugh it off with something like, "Oh, Sophie's figuring herself out. She's not really the ambitious type." It used to sting, that tone, that little jab disguised as a joke. But I stayed quiet, because I thought that's what good daughters did. When I turned 16, things started to fall apart financially. My dad's small business went bankrupt, and my mom lost her job not long after. I remember the night they sat Ethan and me down at the dinner table. The air was heavy, no laughter, no teasing. Just silence. Then my dad said, "We've decided to move abroad. There are better opportunities there." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "Move, abroad?" I asked. "All of us?" My mother wouldn't look at me. She said, "We've done the math, Sophie. We can't afford to take everyone. We can barely buy 3 tickets as it is." I blinked. 3 tickets? But, there's 4 of us. And that's when it hit me. They weren't taking me. My dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's not forever. Just until we settle. You can stay with Aunt May for a while. You'll be fine, sweetheart." I wanted to scream. "You're leaving me behind? You're really leaving me?" My mom finally looked up, her voice sharper now. "Don't make this harder than it already is. You're almost an adult. You'll manage. You're too sensitive, Sophie, always have been. We can't afford to babysit your emotions right now." Babysit my emotions. That's what she called it, like my pain was an inconvenience. The next morning, I watched from the driveway as they loaded the car. Ethan was excited, grinning like he was going on vacation. He didn't even look back when the car pulled away. My mother leaned out the window before they turned the corner. "Be good for Aunt May. We'll call you soon." But she didn't. Days passed, then weeks, then months, not a single phone call. No letters. No updates. Just silence. At night, I'd lie awake in Aunt May's small guest room, staring at the ceiling, trying not to cry. I kept replaying my mom's last words in my head, "You're too much of a burden." That was the moment something hardened inside me. If they thought I was a burden, I would prove them wrong. If they thought I'd never make it, I'd show them just how far I could go without them. That night, I promised myself, one day, they would regret ever leaving me behind. When my parents left, I had nothing, no savings, no safety net, no family to lean on except Aunt May, who was kind but struggling herself. She worked 2 jobs and still barely made rent. I didn't want to be another mouth to feed, so I got a job as soon as I turned 17. It wasn't glamorous. I worked long shifts at a local diner, scrubbing tables, refilling coffee cups, and smiling through exhaustion. Every night, I'd come home smelling like grease and burnt toast. But I didn't care. Every dollar I earned was mine. Every tip, every hour, proof that I could survive on my own. But survival wasn't enough. I wanted more. I used to walk past this big glass office building downtown on my way to work. The people inside looked confident, polished, like they belonged to another world entirely. I remember thinking, one day, I'll walk in there, not as a server, but as someone they respect. So I started saving every cent I could. I cut corners, skipped meals, and even studied at night using borrowed textbooks. Aunt May had an old laptop that took 10 minutes to start, but it became my lifeline. I watched free online business courses, taught myself bookkeeping, and even took part-time community classes. It wasn't easy, I was constantly exhausted. There were nights I cried quietly in my tiny rented room, wondering if my parents had ever once thought about me. Did they ever miss me? Did they ever feel guilty? But every time those thoughts came, I reminded myself, they made their choice. At 20, I landed an internship at a small accounting firm. It didn't pay much, but I worked like my life depended on it, because, in a way, it did. I stayed late, volunteered for extra work, and soaked up everything I could. Within 2 years, I was promoted to junior accountant. That first real paycheck, the one with my name on it, not just tips, felt like redemption. I took Aunt May out to dinner to celebrate. She smiled through tears, saying, "You're doing everything your parents said you couldn't." I hope they see that one day. I smiled back, but inside, I thought, I don't care if they see it. I'll build something so big they won't have a choice but to notice. That thought became my motivation. By the time I turned 27, I had saved enough to start my own business, a financial consulting company that helped small businesses manage their books and grow sustainably. The first year was rough. There were weeks I couldn't pay myself a salary. But little by little, clients came, word spread, and my company grew. By 30, I had a small office and a staff of 5. By 32, we were working with national clients. And by 34, we had expanded into real estate investment. I remember standing outside a property one morning, a familiar street, a familiar row of houses, and realizing something unbelievable. One of the homes for sale was my parents' old house. The same house they left me behind in. I don't know what came over me, but I bought it, not as revenge, but as a symbol. The girl they abandoned now owned the place they once called home. When I signed those papers, I thought that was the end of my story with them. But I was wrong. Because life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. It had been 10 years since I'd last seen my parents. 10 years since that car drove away and left me standing in the driveway with nothing but a suitcase and a hollow promise that they'd call. By the time I was 35, my company had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. I wasn't just running a small firm anymore, I was overseeing multiple businesses, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and managing properties across the city. Life wasn't easy, but it was mine. Then one morning, I received a call from a local real estate agent I often worked with. "Hey, Sophie," she said, sounding hesitant. "You might want to see this. There's a family interested in renting one of your older properties. It's, your old address." That caught my attention. My parents' old house? She hesitated again. "Yeah. And here's the thing, they mentioned your last name. Said it used to be their home." For a second, my breath caught in my throat. My parents? After all these years? I asked her to schedule a meeting, partly out of curiosity, partly out of something else I couldn't name. When the day came, I sat in the living room of that same house, freshly renovated, polished floors, new paint, modern lighting, waiting. The sound of a car pulling up made my stomach twist in knots. The front door opened, and there they were. My mother looked older, smaller somehow. Her once perfectly styled hair was streaked with gray. My father followed behind her, his shoulders slumped, carrying an air of defeat I'd never seen before. When my mother's eyes landed on me, she froze. "As Sophie?" I smiled politely, standing up. "Hello, Mom. Dad." She blinked, visibly flustered. "You own this place?" "Yes," I said evenly. "For a few years now." My father's voice trembled slightly. "We had no idea, we just thought that someone else owned it?" I interrupted softly. "Yeah. Life's full of surprises." They exchanged a nervous glance. Then my mother sighed, the kind of sigh she used to give when she was about to ask for something. "We've fallen on hard times," she began. "We moved abroad, but things didn't go as planned. The economy collapsed, your father lost his job, and we don't have much left. We were hoping to rent this place again. It feels like home." I couldn't help the ironic smile that crept across my face. Home. The word felt bitter on my tongue. They wanted to come back to the same place they had abandoned me in. I folded my arms. "You want to rent this house?" "Yes," my father said quickly. "Just until we get back on our feet. We'd really appreciate your help, Sophie. You've always been such a good girl." I almost laughed at that. A good girl? The same burden they left behind? But instead, I said calmly, "That's interesting. Because when you left me here, I wasn't good enough for you. Remember?" My mother's eyes darted to the floor. "Sophie, that was a difficult time. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut in. "You chose convenience over family. You chose to start fresh without me." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stood there, faces pale, realizing that the little girl they'd left behind wasn't so little anymore. Finally, my mom whispered, "So, are you saying no?" I gave a small, polite smile. "I'm saying I'll think about it." Because part of me, the part that had suffered, worked, cried, and grown, wanted to know just how far they'd fall before they realized what they'd done. And that realization was coming sooner than they thought. After that awkward meeting, my parents left looking hopeful, like they thought I'd cave out of guilt. But I didn't. I didn't owe them anything. Not after years of silence, not after they left me behind without a second thought. Still, something inside me wanted closure, not revenge. I needed to face them one last time and make them see what they had done. A week later, I invited them back, not to discuss rent, but to talk. When they arrived, they were dressed in their best clothes. My mother wore a faded floral dress that had seen better days, and my father had combed his hair neatly, as if preparing for a job interview. They looked tired. We sat down in the same living room where they had once told me I was staying behind. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mom smiled nervously. "So, have you thought about our request?" "I have," I said, folding my hands on the table. "But before I give you an answer, I want to ask something." They both nodded. "Do you remember the night you left?" I asked. "Do you remember telling me I'd be fine on my own?" My dad sighed, already defensive. "Sophie, we didn't have a choice. We thought we were doing what was best." "For who?" I interrupted. "For me? Or for you?" My mother opened her mouth but couldn't speak. I continued. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning wondering if your parents are still alive? To spend birthdays staring at the phone, hoping it'll ring? You didn't even send a letter. Not once. You left me with nothing, no money, no future, no love. And somehow, I survived." They sat there, silent, faces full of regret, or maybe shame. My father murmured, "We're sorry, Sophie. Truly. We thought we'd come back for you sooner. But then life got complicated, and we made mistakes." I looked between them, these two people who had once been my whole world, and felt an unexpected calm wash over me. "I know you made mistakes," I said softly. "And I've made peace with that. But I can't pretend nothing happened. I built everything I have from the ground up, every cent, every success, without you. And now, you're standing in my home, asking for help." My mom's voice cracked. "Please, Sophie. We're desperate. Just until we can find work." I took a deep breath. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside was a lease agreement, and a check. "I'll do one better," I said. "I'll pay for a few months of rent at a smaller apartment across town. It's modest, but safe." My mom looked confused. "You're not letting us stay here?" I shook my head. "No. This house isn't yours anymore. It's mine. And honestly, I think that's how it should be." Her expression hardened, and she muttered, "You're being cruel, Sophie." That made me smile, not out of spite, but irony. "No, Mom. I'm just setting boundaries. Something I should have done years ago." My father nodded slowly, maybe realizing this was the moment they lost the right to pity themselves. He took her hand and stood up. Before leaving, he turned to me and said quietly, "You became stronger than we ever imagined." And for the first time, I saw honesty in his eyes. As they walked out, I stood by the window, watching them disappear down the street, just like they had all those years ago. But this time, I wasn't the girl they left behind. I was the woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes they left me in. And I didn't need their approval anymore. Months passed after that final conversation with my parents. I didn't expect to hear from them again, and honestly, I didn't need to. I'd finally said everything I had kept bottled up for years. But life has a strange way of closing loops. One afternoon, I was at the office, going through client reports, when my assistant walked in holding a file. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "They don't have an appointment, but they say it's urgent." When she said their names, I froze. It was my parents. I almost told her to send them away. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, told me to let them in. They entered the room slowly, looking even more worn out than before. My mother's eyes were tired, and my father looked thinner, defeated. "Sophie," my mom began softly, "we're not here to ask for money. We just wanted to see you." I studied them for a moment. The bitterness that used to twist inside me was gone. In its place was something else, peace. They talked for a while about how hard things had been, how they regretted the choices they'd made, how proud they were of me. For once, I didn't hear excuses, just honesty. When they stood to leave, my mom hesitated by the door and whispered, "You turned out to be everything we hoped for, even though we didn't deserve it." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I reached into my desk drawer and handed her an envelope. Inside was a deed copy, not to their old house, but to a smaller one I'd recently bought in a quiet neighborhood. "It's not much," I said. "But it's a place to stay. Don't think of it as forgiveness, think of it as a fresh start." My mom's lips trembled. "Why would you do this for us after everything we did?" I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Because I needed to be the kind of person you weren't. And because I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me, so I can finally let go." They both cried, quietly, humbly, before leaving. When the door closed, I leaned back in my chair and let out a deep breath. It felt like the last page of a very long chapter had finally turned. Later that night, I drove past my old neighborhood, parking across the street from the house I once called home. The lights were on inside, a young couple had bought it, probably starting their own story, full of hope. I smiled. The girl who once stood on that driveway crying had made it, not because of her parents, but in spite of them. And as I drove away under the street lights, I whispered to myself. They left me behind, but I never stopped moving forward. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free.